Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Podcasts. Wow, what a waste of time. Why in the world would you be listening to a podcast, much less be a guest on one? Oh, no, wait a second. Podcasts are awesome. And being a guest on a podcast is really awesome. How do I know? Because our guest, Angie Trueblood, is here to tell us exactly how and why that works. Angie, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so good to be here, David. I'm excited to connect.
So you are the founder, CEO, grand poobah of the Podwise Group. Tell us a little bit about what your professional journey has been that brought you to the current work that you're doing today, and then we'll jump in from there.
Perfect. Like most of your guests, it is a long and winding road. So my background initially was in education, specifically teaching science and biology. That evolved into a career in pharmaceutical sales for about 10 years. And like a lot of women, when I had my two kiddos, I really felt compelled to be spending more time with them, and also to make sure that the career that I was in lit me up. If I was going to be away from them, I wanted to be passionate about the work that I was doing. So when they were smaller, 2 and 4, I transitioned home and did some work on the side, really with other moms, teaching them how to meal plan. That was my first business because that was the stage of life that I was in. I evolved that into an online business where I had a course, because that was in the heyday of courses, right? You made a course for everything. And then I realized you need an audience in order to buy your course. And I started exploring audience growth strategies. And
I'm curious, just real quick, what was the course about?
So the name of it was What the Fork is for Dinner. And it taught parents, families, people how to meal plan, like how to come up with a really simple way to get food on the table for dinner. So funny. And I eventually started pitching myself for media interviews, for podcast interviews. It was back in 2016, 2017. And as I had some of these opportunities go live, I had friends who were in my business circle ask, well, how did you get the local news to come to your house and to do a segment on packing lunches for back to school? And how did you get on this podcast? And I think it was my background in selling and understanding if I wanted an opportunity to partner with someone, I really had to pitch an idea that was beneficial for both of us. And that's what I had been doing. So I recognized my love of sales was not something that everyone else loved, and people wanted my help. So I quickly shifted into more of a freelance model and started pitching clients to be guests on other people's podcasts. And that was back in 2017. And we've grown ever since. We have a small but mighty team and work with clients to help them grow their audience by guesting on other people's podcasts.
Totally fantastic. So a zillion questions for you, which is good because this is a podcast and you need to have a zillion questions to get a zillion brilliant answers.
Yeah.
So the average person, they may be consultant, professional services, they're an attorney, they're an orthodontist, they're a lawyer, they're a trainer, speaker, whatever they are, but they're not famous. They don't have a book. They're no big deal. They have a very small email list and they need to bust out of anonymity. And they come to you and they say, Angie, here's who I am. Here's what I got. Here's what I share with my clients or patients. What's my angle? What's my pitch? What's going to separate me from all of the other people who kind of look like me and sound like me? How do you start to chip away at that messaging and that differentiation when a guest might come to you and go, listen, I'm just the dentist. I'm just the lawyer. I'm like all the other lawyers that do what I do.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you zhuzh them up to get ready for a podcast guesting campaign.
So it's really digging into what does make them different, because so often we take for granted that we are just like every other person in our industry. I mean, we think we're different, but we haven't really nailed what that is. And so for us, logistically, we have a really detailed intake form, which is so funny for me because the real magic of getting into our client's head comes when we are on a live call like this and we are asking questions. So myself and our primary outreach executive, there's two of us on the call with our client because we each pick up on different things. And it's asking, we had a client recently, she is an ops specialist. And so she helps systemize and optimize operations inside of agencies and big companies. And as we were talking in passing, she mentioned that she had sold a previous company for low 5 figures, but that if her systems had been ideal, it would have sold for much more. And I'm like, wait a second. That is a topic. That's a conversation that sets you apart from any other operations expert out there because you know the benefit and the magnitude of why you have to have your ops optimized. So it's really pulling stories out of them, digging into why. It's kind of what you're doing right now, right? Like asking the questions to peel back the layers of the onion. And I think it's really hard for someone to do that on their own because you don't know what makes your backstory interesting and exciting because it's so ingrained in who you are. So we're the fly on the wall for our clients and we're constantly pulling that stuff out of them.
So if let's say that we have that piece done and now we're entering the pitching phase. Yeah. And I know that there's mixed feelings about this next question. Some people say, you know what? Just send an email, keep it short, keep it concise. Don't do attachments. Don't put fancy jazz in there. And this might be like years ago. Oh, you have to have a podcast pitch sheet. You have to have a fancy PDF with all of your credentials and your quotes and your whatever. As a host, I get a lot of pitches, obviously. I don't really care about the one pager. I'm much more interested in the email. So people that are listening, they're like just pulling their hair out going, I just can't get this one pager right. Do we need the one pager? Is the one pager an ancient relic? What's going on?
So this is a great question, David. I host a podcast myself, the Go Pitch Yourself podcast. I get pitches all the time. And first of all, the one pager, let's table that because I do have ideas on it. I think it is a nice to have. I don't think it is vital, right? To me, that email is the most important thing that you are sending. The host is never going to click a link for a one sheet if the email is a total dud or is a total autobiography of your life. So for me, it's really the email. I don't think that it needs to be super fancy. I will say our pitches tend to be longer than some of the ones that I see, but also far shorter than the ones that include all the things that you could ever ask about the guest. I think the focus on the email should really be about the topic that you are proposing to talk about. Because if it is not a relevant topic, the host is never going to say yes. So we're used to seeing a lot of templated emails landing in our inbox. You know, whoever sent them, send it to 100 different podcast hosts, and they're not proposing a topic that makes any sense for what your show is about. So just by doing a little bit of research and knowing who that host talks to and what they talk to their audience about and coming up with a topic that is well aligned to that audience, you are setting yourself in the top 10% of pitches that go out. I think you should include some links because if I'm interested, if I think, oh, this is a really interesting topic, let me poke around and see who this person is, what they sound like. You know, I don't want to have someone on my show that has not ideal audio quality. So I like to put enough links in to where if the host is curious, they can poke around and do research without having to Google my name or the client name.
Yes. Let's talk about that customization process.
Yeah.
I love what you said about a little bit of research, because a little bit of research goes a really long way.
Yeah.
And the bar is so low that it's like, listen, do you even know who my audience is?
Right.
Do you even know what kind of guests we've had on before?
Right.
Now I'm not the kind of host that says you must listen to at least 3 episodes, because people don't have time. But did you go to my podcast page? Did you look on, Apple Podcasts and see my little 1-paragraph description of what this show is all about and who it's for and what kind of topics we talk about? That's just like with a sales outreach, right? So your background in sales, my background in sales, if it's relevant, right? Relevant and somehow connected to what that person is about, they're going to listen. They're going to pay attention. If it's no way connected and no way relevant, it's very easy to hit the delete button. So how much research is enough research on a show or a host? And where does it cross the line into like weirdness and stalking?
It's amazing. This audio with you is so great because you're saying so many of the things that I teach and what we do inside of our client work is that you don't need to spend an entire day listening to a podcast before you ever send an email. Exactly what you said. You go to the Apple Podcast description. That is literally what the host decided their podcast is about. So you can just read it. Go over to their website. Typically, if it's a business show, they're going to have on their website who they serve, how they serve them. And by knowing that, you can really tweak your topic to meet their needs and to support their greater mission. Your goal is really to help them create content for their audience. And all you need to do is look at a couple things to figure that out. Put their name in the email, spell their name correctly, include the name of the show. And this is just where I differ from a lot of the pitches that I see. I don't care if someone emails to be a guest on my show and if they reference the name of a guest that I had, like, oh, Angie, I loved episode 85 of Go Pitch Yourself with Susie Q. Anyone could do that. To me, that is no more of a connection than saying, I discovered your podcast and I love you, right? The first paragraph of a pitch, that's what we call it. It's a connection paragraph to bridge the gap of why am I reaching out? What do we have in common?
Hang on. Let's back up the truck. Beep, 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 beep. Listen, I have a brand new sales book out there. You got to get your hands on it. It is awesome. It is amazing. It is fantastic. It is useful, practical, actionable, and a ton of bonuses are waiting for you over at doitselling.com. Grab your copy right now and grab all the bonuses, goodies, companion tools, and downloads that go with the book. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Talk a little bit about, can we unpack maybe just the skeleton of what that pitch email should contain? So paragraph 1, connection/common ground. And then what are the other building blocks of a good pitch email?
Yeah. In that first paragraph, you also level set why you're reaching out, right? You are sending a pitch. So you are asking for something. So make sure in that first paragraph, you're saying, I had an idea for an episode. I would love to get your take on my being a guest on your show. Be straightforward. We don't need to hide in the email what you're asking for. Our second paragraph, and by paragraph, I mean 1 to 2 sentences, is a very brief synopsis of who you are. So take your 500-word bio and shrink it down as tightly as you can, just to level set who you are. If you have a couple of credibility metrics, you can pop those in there, but we don't need to know all the awards. None of that as a podcast host is super relevant to how you're going to show up for my audience. Yeah. So that's the second little blurb. And then we get into the topic. I'm also not a fan of someone pitching, here are 5 different things that I could talk about on your show. You pick. I don't have time to pick. And we don't want to put the onus of developing this conversation on the host, right? So we actually say, knowing a bit about your audience, and then we'll define who their audience is. So seeing that your audience are professional speakers, service providers, et cetera. One thing I've seen that they struggle with is XYZ. I thought a topic on blank might be really beneficial for them. And then we bullet out 3 to 5 talking points so that the host starts to get a sense of what that conversation might entail. Again, we're doing the legwork, right? We're not leaving it up to the host. And then near the bottom, we share links to other interviews that we've been on. When we pitch clients, we actually link to an audio snippet that they can just click on and then hear the guest's voice, because it's an audio and the host needs to know that they can speak intelligently, right?
Right.
And then we leave their big bio for at the very, very end in case the host wants to know. So that's the basic gist.
Yeah, that's so good. It's funny, the distinction between, hey, here's 5 different topics versus here's the topic, and then here's 3 to 4 bullets under that topic. It gives you the specificity, but also the variety without saying, I could talk about anything. I mean, I remember getting one pitch. It was like 5 different topics, but like almost completely unrelated. Like that could have been 5 different guests. It's like, dressing for success or sales strategies or customer retention. It's like, what are you really an expert on, dude? Like what's really going on here? Because I'm not going to go to dress for success person to get customer retention strategies.
No,
are you kidding me? But people do that, right? And that's an extreme example, but wow.
Well, and the beauty of the 5 bullets is it is a sneaky way to offer other options to the host. We've had a host come back and say, hey, I really want to talk about bullet number 3. Can we just expand on that? And also, often the host won't really have a conversation about anything that we've pitched. They just value the work that we put in. They think the guest is a good fit. And then the interview goes wherever it goes. So we have clients come back all the time. And they're like, they didn't really talk about the topic that you pitched. I'm like, I know that's the foot in the door for doing the due diligence and for really pairing you with a host where it would make sense for you to be on their show.
Now, let's talk about that, because that's something interesting. Both myself as a guest, because I occasionally guest on other people's shows. If you have some sort of, I don't want to say agenda, because that seems self-serving, but obviously you're doing this to promote your business.
For sure.
You're doing this to build your audience or build your list or to expand your reach in some way, shape, or form. Let's go back to that host that said, hey, let's expand on bullet number 3. So you want to add tremendous value to those listeners. What is your best coaching advice, Angie, when an interview is kind of drilling down into a subset of your expertise, but you want to showcase some of the other things that you do? What comes to mind is it kind of like a political stump speech or a press conference that no matter what the question, you always want to work in this answer? And I've had people do that on my show, and it's like, that wasn't what I asked you. So there's a subtle way of doing it that I think is appropriate, and there's probably all kinds of wrong ways of doing it. What's your best coaching on that question?
So I think the first part, it's more of a higher level answer in how we view podcast interviews. They are so different than a sales call or being at a networking event, right? It is long form content to where the listener is, one, valuing the relationship and the engagement that they see between the person that they tuned into because they trust. That's you, David, not me. They are listening because of you, and seeing, is there some synergy between these 2 people to where it seems like David is valuing what Angie is doing and kind of trusting in her expertise. So you've got to put that primary. It is a conversation that you're having with the host, and you want to loop in the audience to that conversation as much as you can. So I always want the listener to leave thinking, oh, Angie, one, really knows what she's talking about. I really like her. Like, she is someone that I feel like I can trust, not someone who is out there just spewing marketing messages for 30 minutes. No one wants to listen to that anyway. So I think it's just the approach that I take with what an interview will do. I much more value the networking that I can do with the host, the relationships that I can form with the listeners. They might not be ideal clients, but they might know people. So I think I take it a different approach to it than a lot of people in the podcast guesting space. That said, there are definitely things that you can do during an interview to plant seeds And I got that term from Nikki Rausch, who I know is a previous guest on your show. She and I are great friends. We've worked together. But that's really what you should be doing during an interview. And the seeds need to be relevant, right? So I'm not planting watermelon seeds when we are talking about vegetables. You know what I mean? So I have mentioned over the course of this interview that I have a podcast. I have mentioned that I work with clients and we pitch them, but I'm not going off of our conversation in a lot of different directions to make sure that listeners know that. It's a dance, right? But you have to be respectful of the host and what they are looking to create for their audience.
Yes. And by the way, I love the meta level that we're on now. It's like, well, yeah. And by the way, I have to give you tremendous credit as far as believing in what you're up to. Because like I said, I get a ton of pitches. Yeah. What I will sometimes do is I get a pitch. It's like, maybe I don't respond right away. Or sometimes I don't even respond at all. And I just delete the first message thinking, if they're serious, they'll follow up. Mm-hmm. Less than 20% follow up. Even some of the, other quote unquote pitching agencies. When I got your pitch, it was like, oh my God, yes, we have to have you on. It was just like, boom, yes. Because it was totally relevant. It was totally customized. And I knew it was going to be a fascinating topic that our listeners are really hungry to learn more about. So, that's again, the meta level. It's like, well, why are you here, Angie? Because your pitch was awesome and it worked. It worked.
Well, I think the follow-up is really important too. And I want your listeners, there's varying levels of it, but to me, every touch point that you have with a host is an opportunity to build a relationship and to leave a good or bad taste in their mouth. So I've gotten pitches where I'll get follow-up 2 days later. And I'm like, dude, give me a minute. You just sent this pitch out. So you need to be human in the way that you are following up, even if you're following up on a schedule. So we always give our hosts, we have a 2-week follow-up. And then after that, our sort of breakup email is 4 weeks after that. You want to follow up and you want to respect them, right? If they're not responding, we're not banging on the front door for hours.
Yes, absolutely. And again, so many good parallels to the sales process as to the podcast pitching process. Let's talk about the call to action. Mm-hmm. So my belief, and maybe because I'm a marketing and a sales guy, my belief as a host is I am here to market the hell out of my guest. And so, I don't want the guest to be pitchy. I will say, oh my God, you totally have to connect with Angie. Angie's awesome. Angie's amazing. So much value. And at the end, we're not doing it yet, but we can practice it. At the end of every episode, the listeners know this because they've heard this hundreds of times. I will say, Angie, this has been such a fantastic interview. And so far we're on track for that, by the way. Angie,
if you change your tune.
Such a fantastic interview. How can people get connected and stay connected to more Angie Trueblood brilliance? And then what some people do, which I think is a mistake, is they will say things like, well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, which is like, meh, right? That's not really a direct call to action. And there's no value for the guest to connect with me on LinkedIn. Second mistake, I think, is if they want to book a call, if they want to book a strategy session, go to xyz.com/call. There are people that are listening, right? Hundreds, and if you have a big show, thousands. They're not ready to book a call yet. And you are wasting. So imagine if you gave them a gift. Imagine if you had a lead magnet, right? You would get hundreds of leads, maybe 2 or 3 calls, the people that are ready right now. So talk about the difference between, from a guesting standpoint, connect with me on LinkedIn, book a call if you're ready to give me lots and lots of money, or, hey, I have a free gift and here's where to go get the free gift. Pros and cons of each of those in your experience.
Yeah. So again, I love this. I would say, first of all, if you have a podcast, you are one of the lucky ones as a podcast guest, because the activation energy needed to required for the listener to go over and listen and hit follow to your podcast is very low. They are not changing platform. They don't have to get on a different device. I posted something about this yesterday. They don't have to put their email address into a tiny little box on their phone. So that is sort of a plug for also having some sort of audio content when you are guesting. That's always my first call to action because my podcast is very well optimized for client acquisition. Regarding the book a call, we differ a little bit on that because a lot of the folks that we work with are service providers and they're not offering courses. They're not offering memberships. And the people that would book them, similar to me, people that would pay my team $1,800 a month don't really want an opt-in for me to tell them how to pitch. They might want an opt-in for me to tell them how to convert their interviews. And that's probably something I should think about, David. But it needs to be aligned with who you are trying to attract back to your space. So offer a free gift if it is aligned with the type of person that you tend to work with. We have a general website or a URL. It's the podwisegroup.com/hi there. And we have been coaching our clients to do that for all their podcast interviews. And it really does have anything you might want that I talk about. It has a discovery call. It has LinkedIn. It has my podcast. You can't overwhelm the listener with 5 different things to go and do. So I like having this one space to where they know they can book a call with me. They can get an example of 5 pitches that we've sent that have converted, right? So you just need to figure that out. You need to figure it out before you're on the podcast, right? Know the audience that you're getting in front of. What are you going to be asking them to do? I will say regarding the opt-in, we have seen the benefit of that, the benefit of podcast guesting as related to growing an email list dwindle significantly over the years. And that's why I've steered away from coaching our clients to do that, because it's that activation energy. One, consumers are more savvy, right? They know. They're like, oh, she's got a free gift. She's going to start emailing me, which is fine. And it also requires them to go somewhere else. We have thought about like a text opt-in, which I think is much smarter when you're on a podcast. So I know that was a convoluted answer, but I think there's got to be clarity. And there has to be, like you said, of what's in it for them. If I tell people to connect with me on LinkedIn, I tell them, send me a connection request and include in the note, I heard you on David's podcast. I would love to connect. And then we can talk in the DMs.
Wow. Really, really good. And not to brag on myself here, but I'm a pretty sophisticated marketer.
Yeah.
And I never thought of the omnibus page that has kind of like cool, warm, and hot options all on one page.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you want to get the goodie? Here's the goodie. Hey, you want to check out my course? Here's my course. Hey, you want to book a call? Let's book a call.
Yeah.
But it's not 3 separate links. And it's not like, well, if you want to go here, then go to this URL. If you want to go there, go to that URL. And people like, dude, I'm in my car. You know?
Yes. Well, and I think a lot of the advice that we hear is like, give them one place to go. But we're all human. Like, I trust that the podcast listener can decide what is best for them.
Sure.
And that you, podcast listener, will engage me in whatever way you prefer. I don't need to pigeonhole you into one way, because this selling gig it's fluid. It's relationship based. We all have our own agency in doing what we want and need.
For sure. Now, the beauty of a podcast guesting strategy, and again, I'm a quote unquote professional host, total amateur as a guest. So I want to put that disclaimer out there.
I doubt it.
So I'm asking the guesting guru here. There are podcasts that people record, and it's literally the gift that keeps on giving. They get anywhere from dozens to hundreds of leads every month from that episode that might have been a year ago or 2 years ago or 18 months ago. There's other appearances where it's nothing. It's like maybe there was a little spike when the episode was new, and that thing is now in mothballs and it's not sending leads your way ever again. In your experience, what's the difference between an audience magnet podcast interview versus one that kind of fizzles and doesn't really generate leads after it's new?
It has to do with the engagement of the listener. And that doesn't mean it has to be a giant audience. What we see is that pitching to the niches. So a lot of our clients, like I mentioned, are service providers, so bookkeepers. When we have a call with our client, I say, what are the types of businesses that you love serving? And we had a bookkeeping client and we navigated COVID with her. And one of her primary ways or clients that she loved working with were gym owners, like fitness studios. And so we would pitch to podcasts that were talking to fitness studios. And it's brilliant because they show up week after week listening to this podcast that is curated just for them. And if you throw someone in the mix who's an expert on finances, well, there's not going to be another finance expert in a month, right? So that person shows up as a trusted expert who that audience then will continue to book discovery calls with when they need bookkeeping or accounting services. So I love looking at how tight is that podcast topic, because to me, that really reflects an engaged audience and one that trusts the host. Yes, downloads are great, right? We love big podcasts because there's more people to choose from. But it really has to do with how well that audience is listening and taking action based on their relationship with the host.
So good. And this also brings up another question that I wanted to ask you. And niche is critical. I'm sure people come to you and they say, Angie, I'm going to pay you all this beautiful money. And here's what I want. I want to get on Tim Ferriss. I want to get on John Lee Dumas. I want to get on all of these mega number 1 or number 10 podcast in the world, because that's going to make me successful as a bookkeeper or as a consultant or as a customer service speaker. Yes, I know. Terrific episode here, but have you seen our latest web training? Oh my goodness, pop over there right now, or as soon as you're done listening to this episode, it's doitmarketing.com/webinar. See you over there. Back to the good stuff. Talk about, because I think it's a myth, talk about big shows versus relevant shows. And how should we manage our expectations of the payoff? And is there really a payoff to being on these big shows? Or is niche the way to go?
Okay. God bless you for asking this question. We actually recorded an episode on Go Pitch Yourself. I forget the episode number, but it was over the last couple of months. We're recording this in June 2023 with Alex Sanfilipino, who was a guest on John Lee Dumas's podcast, which does have a media fee or an appearance fee of $3,500. So we went deep into that whole experience and the whole ROI. And what I have found, well, one, it's nearly impossible to get on these big shows unless you know the host. I mean, even if you do know the host, again, they're curating content for their audience. So unless it is a slam dunk topic, it's just not going to happen. So we level set that quickly. Now, a year and a half ago, we got a client on Pat Flynn's show, Smart Passive Income. And that was because we saw that he was talking about something on social. Our client had chimed in to engage, and there was a lot of conversation around it. So I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm seeing this is getting a lot of engagement on Instagram. Would you be up for having a conversation on your podcast? So it can happen. Sometimes we have to stair step to it, like a campaign almost. You got to kind of grow your experience in the podcasting space. Again, unless you have a relationship and a slam dunk topic that is just super, super relevant. So I love the niches because one, it's easier to get booked on those shows. There's not as, let them fight out Tim Ferriss. That's fine. We will pitch to the niches and have our clients get really solid ROI.
Yeah, really, really important. And I think the expectation management, do you want to go for a general audience or do you want to go for an audience of potential prospects and buyers?
Yeah.
Because the gigantic shows, yes, they have a lot of listenership. Only a teeny tiny fragment or micro subset of those people are going to be your prospects or your leads.
Yeah.
So it might make a nice media credential,
right,
but don't expect results from it, right?
No. I mean, that's the thing about it. If you're going to host a podcast now also, right? Like long gone are the days that you can just have a podcast and interview all the random entrepreneurs about their journey. audiences want to know what to expect week after week if they're going to stick with you. And so there needs to be a level of tightness in podcasts as a host and when you're guesting on other shows, because the ones that are just highlighting a lot of different topics, they might have a lot of listeners, but they're just not concentrated. They're not expecting to take action.
Right, right. Okay, let's fast forward the clock. We have engaged the Podwise group. We are on show after show after show after show. We have all of these links. We have all of these live feeds, and some might be video and some might be on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, etc. What do we do with this archive of shows that we've been a guest on? How do we capitalize on that? How do we socialize that? How do we spread that out and amplify it to the audiences that matter to us?
Yeah. So first of all is doing your due diligence as a guest to help the host promote it. The worst as a host is having a show come out and whomever was your guest doesn't share it at all. Also, hosts, don't invite guests on your show because you think their audience is going to help you grow your show. Again, I'm a big fan of really leaning into your own audience and serving them. So as a guest, I am not super active on Instagram. I am active on LinkedIn, and I will occasionally share my episodes that I have guested on there. But what we do is on my podcast, we produce every other week, and I have a segment called Podcast Love of the Week. And that is where I share a podcast, typically one that I have guested on, to my listeners and tell them to go listen to it, because podcast listeners are the best people to likely go over and listen to another podcast. So when our episode goes live, you'll have almost a promo on my podcast to my listeners who will likely go over and listen to the interview. So promote it, but promote it where you are most active and engaged with your people. I don't need someone posting an episode where they guested on Go Pitch Yourself on Facebook where they don't interact with people. Share it where you are engaging. We share it in our newsletter and on our podcast. So that's the first thing, is figure out your game plan for sharing that episode. As you start to amass this library of content, we'll create a Spotify playlist of all of our clients' guest episodes so that they can share it in pitches. If you've got 10 to 15 shows that you've guested on, put them in an easy to digest playlist so that you can send it to potential hosts, categorize them by topic, use it in your welcome email newsletter, right? Share it with your audience. We're starting to step into the space of content repurposing, because the one thing that I hate is seeing people who are just busting it to be guests on other people's shows, and they're not using that content on their own platforms. So I've experimented over the last month with some AI, taking client interviews where they've guested on other shows, they've gone live, and we're creating blogs for them. We are creating some social media captions so that they can use that to engage their audience and to share the episode.
Nice. That's really, really smart, is to do the Spotify playlist of the shows that you've been on. So let's say that we're in the niche, and if you go to the platforms like Listen Notes, podcasts are ranked, right? So top 5%, top 2%, top 1%, top 0.5%, all of these rankings and how big the audience is and average downloads and all this jazz. When someone is fairly new, like you get someone who has not been on a lot of podcasts, do you pitch them, or do you recommend that they pitch themselves if they're not using you, which would be a huge mistake, by the way?
Why?
Huge mistake.
Why would you do that?
Why would you not talk to Angie about getting booked on a lot of shows? So we're in a niche. Let's say gym owners was an example. There are podcasts that are not a big deal. There are podcasts that are sort of a big deal. And there's going to be probably 8 to 10 800-pound gorillas of like top 1% podcasts that every gym owner is going to be tuned into. Do you start small? Is it important to start small? Do you kind of work your way up to the bigger shows, or what's your recommendation there?
Yeah, if you've never guested before, I highly recommend starting with small shows, more from the quality of the interview that you're going to give. The beauty of guesting is it lets you kind of pressure test your talking points, and you get to have someone ask questions, which helps you recognize what is it that people actually want to hear me talk about. Again, it's like how we deep dive with our clients and pull stories out of them that they never thought was important. When you have a host asking questions of you, you start to formulate who you are and your messages in real time. You never want to get booked on a really big show and you've only done 1 or 2 interviews to where you're nervous. I mean, you're going to be nervous anyway if it's giant, but you don't really want to be freaking out and not feel confident showing up to be a guest on a giant show. So we like to stair step up, but we also in our pitch list do a mixture of smaller shows, medium shows, and higher level shows. And if we start to get too many yeses, I mean, I don't want to waste our clients' time. If we can get you booked on fewer but bigger shows, I'd rather do that. So if we start to see like a 50% acceptance rate coming in, we're dialing back the small shows and pushing what we perceive to be bigger.
Very nice. And what do you think is a good cadence? Like a typical client, do they want to be on like 2 shows a month, 4, 5 shows a month, 8 shows a month? Does it vary based on their business or their capacity to take on new patients, new clients, new customers?
Yeah, it's really dependent also on their familiarity with the space. We had a client come on and she's like, I don't want to do any more than 10 interviews a month. I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen. We need to talk about that. So our goal in our top level package is to start getting our clients on anywhere from 3 to 4 shows a month by our 3rd to 4th month of working with them, because it does take time to follow up. We have seen, and we're currently evolving some of our longer term packages to offer a little bit of a step down, because that, if you're running a business, having 3 to 4 interviews a month and then repurposing the content, it can be a little exhausting, especially if you host your own show. So I want it to be something that the clients can stick with us long-term, and we're just evolving that. But I would say if you're just starting out, if you guest on 2 shows a month, that's a really good start. And what will happen, you build momentum and you start then to get people inquiring of you. Hey, will you be a guest on my show? I heard you on Susie's podcast. It was great. I'd love to have you on mine. So guesting on 2 a month is a great place to start. And then you can flex up or down as needed.
Angie, this is so great. And I think one thing that not a lot of people understand is, let's compare a podcast guesting service to a public relations firm. People have no qualms about dropping $5,000 a month on a PR firm because they're like, oh, well, they have relationships with journalists. They have relationships with the media. And maybe they do and maybe they don't. But tell me about your relationship and your team's relationship with podcast hosts, because obviously now you and I have a relationship. Mm-hmm. And after we turn off the microphones, I'm probably going to tell you the kind of guests that I would love to have. You then go through your roster and say, oh, well, you should have Jerry and you should have Susan and you should have so-and-so. So I'm guessing that you have these well-established relationships with hosts who have said yes to your guests before. That makes an open door that you now have these existing relationships. Am I correct?
Correct. The work that we do compared to PR, and I have friends in PR, it is more relational. I see what we do as we are almost facilitating networking relationships and then coaching, but also letting whatever happens. We have a database right now inside of ClickUp, well over 1,000 shows. We have documented which of our clients we have pitched to those shows, which have been accepted. We know the ones that are go-tos and they will almost take anyone that we send their way. We know the ones that convert. Like, I know when a client gets on this one particular podcast, they're going to get clients out of it. So we are able to really cherry pick. And that's why we're really starting to niche more into this professional services space. We have a lot of folks right now who are in the HR executive leadership, and we're loving it because with experience comes knowledge that we can apply and really up-level what we do for our clients.
Totally. And that's where I want to draw the distinction, because people listening might be, oh yeah, podcast pitching. I'll get my VA to do that. Your VA has no idea what's going on, has no relationships, has no skills, has no database, and has no track record. So good luck with that. Call Angie. call Angie. So as we're landing the plane, here it comes that we did the meta version before. We're doing the real version now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Angie, this was totally fantastic.
I've loved
Tell
it.
people how they can get connected and stay connected to more Angie Trueblood brilliance.
Thank you. So you can definitely go listen to the Go Pitch Yourself podcast. I would stop what you're doing and go do that now. We just hit 100 episodes. We're an every other week show. So there's lots of content there. You can go to the podwisegroup.com/hi there. And that's Podwise with a Z. And you can sign up for a discovery call. If you are looking to get booked on podcasts and know you want support, we'll hop on a call and really chat through goals and see if it's a good fit. And we've got a freebie where you can opt in. There's lots of things you can see on that page. So definitely go check that out. And then I would say connect with me on LinkedIn. I am at Angie Trueblood. But when you do it, send me a connection request and leave a note that says you heard me on the Selling Show with David. And then we can interact in the DMs. I can give you suggestions on niches to pitch yourself to.
Fantastic. And all of those links, by the way, or the main link that leads to all of those links is going to be directly under this episode when you go to thesellingshow.com. Angie Trueblood, it has been so great talking to you. Value bomb after value bomb after value bomb. I really appreciate you being on with us.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm glad this worked out.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.